After almost 4 years of full-scale war, Russia has found itself in a situation that its own propaganda calls a trap. Z-commentators admit that the initially proclaimed Putin's cunning plan has turned into Zelensky's cunning plan. Russian Z-patriot Maxim Kalashikov spoke quite frankly about the deplorable situation of the Russian Federation. He stated that Ukraine will not give up the remnants of its Donetsk region to Russia. And this is a network of fortified cities, the capture of which the Russian army will spend many years and a huge number of lives of its soldiers. Look, at the moment of negotiations, the main efforts are concentrated on winning back these 36% of the rest of the Donetsk region, and there are 12 more fortified cities. Slavyansk, Kramatorsk. Summer is ending. It is clear that there will be no major offensive of the Russian armed forces. Near Pokrovsk, they cannot close this encirclement, take the Ukrainian armed forces into a cauldron. Instead of closing this cauldron, they rushed north from Pokrovsk. What did they achieve? The Ukrainian armed forces did not lose control there. There was no collapse of the front there. They stopped this breakthrough. It is clear that any of these resistance nodes in the Donbass will have to be taken for a long time and painfully. The battles for Pokrovsk lasted for more than a year and are still going on. There is still butting for Volchansk and there are terrible losses there, Kalashnikov complained. He came to the conclusion that with this war, Russia had fallen into a trap. The situation is developing in a very unpleasant way for us. This is Zelensky's cunning plan. Now we see the clearly outlined plan of this KVN player. He is a smart man. He has a clearly outlined plan to get money from Europe, to buy weapons from America, and to prolong the hostilities. And while Russia is fighting, a fierce economic crisis will rage in its rear. Production will begin to decline. Enterprises will close. Cities and regions will be ruined. Masses of unemployment. A crisis of non-payments, non-payment of taxes to the treasury. Russia will lose the ability to fight and will ask for peace itself. There is nowhere to go. And Zelensky will be the winner, and it does not matter that it is not on the battlefield. He admitted. Even supporters of the war in Russia essentially confirm that a protracted standoff plays into Ukraine's hands. Zelensky's plan is not only to hold the front, but also to exhaust Russia from within, forcing the Kremlin to capitulate under the weight of internal crisis. The liberation of settlements in the Pokrovsk direction in Donetsk Oblast by the defense forces indicates that the Russians' summer offensive has already failed, but that escalations at the front are still to be expected. This was stated by the head of the Ukrainian Center for Security and Cooperation, Sergei Kuzan, on air at Radio NV. We should not overestimate the liberation or capture of several settlements by the enemy. Of course, if these are not such large cities as Pokrovsk or Kramatorsk, the capture of such cities changes the situation itself, the situation in the forces at the operational level, he said. According to him, it is worth considering the dynamics demonstrated by the Ukrainian defense forces. At the same time, he added, this is happening in August, when the peak of the summer offensive, which the Russians were counting on, should have continued. As Kuzan explained, it was now that the Russians should have achieved their greatest successes, and they really planned to break through in the Pokrovsk direction and in the direction of Dobropolye. To break through, to get to our rear, and to create an encirclement for the main urban agglomeration, starting from Kramatorsk and further to Druzhkovka, Konstantinovka. That is the main cities that form our main fortified lines. But they did not succeed. In fact, a large offensive campaign of the Russians was disrupted. But in addition, we have already moved on to counter-offensive actions. For example, in the Sumy, Limansky, and as we can already see, in the Pokrovsky direction. the expert said. According to him, this means that the Russians' summer offensive operation has already failed. The enemy will not let go. We are still waiting for escalations at the front. We understand that there will be escalations both in the Pokrovsk direction and in the Kupiansk area. The enemy plans to create additional difficulties for us to conduct several offensive campaigns somewhere, possibly in Zaporozhye. And we see the enemy's tactics, which consist of searching for weak spots, Kuzan noted. As reported, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, stated yesterday that the Ukrainian Defense Forces successfully counter-attacked and cleared 3 settlements in Donetsk Oblast of Russian occupiers, Mikhailivka, Zelensky, and Volodymyrivka. He noted that the Pokrovsk direction remains the most difficult on the front. The Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine shared that the Ukrainian military continues to hold the defense of Pokrovsk, despite the superior forces of the enemy. Mourning is again in the Russian Z channels. The Ukrainian Defense Forces have preliminarily very successfully covered 2 important military targets of the Russian Armed Forces in the Russian village of Dubrava. The details were revealed by the Russian Z Resource Northern Channel associated with the Russian Occupation Army. This time, the target of the strike was the command post, as well as the control post of the drone operators of the 186th Regiment of the Russian Armed Forces. Dubrava, Kursk region, arrival at the command post of the 186th Motorized Rifle Regiment and the control post of our drone operators. Accurate hit by several HIMARS. They did not hit at random, but clearly knew which houses. Z Channel wrote. He did not report any losses in the Russian armed forces, but judging by the tone of the post, it was not without officers being eliminated. Northern Channel complained that Ukraine regularly targets command posts of the Russian armed forces in this direction. It seems that the enemy is working on targets according to a list sent from our headquarters. They have been flying in very frequently in recent days, complained the authors of the Russian channel. The use of American HIMARS MLRS allows the Ukrainian military to hit targets at a range of up to 80 kilometers. Given the distance to Dubrava, the system is fully suitable for such strikes. High-precision strikes on command posts significantly complicate the control of Russian army units and reduce the effectiveness of their actions on the front line. Earlier, media reported that HIMARS covered a concentration of Russian armed forces near Belgorod, many 200s. The Kremlin is silent. On July the 26th, the Ukrainian Defense Forces very effectively fired the HIMARS rocket system at Russian territory. A military facility of the aggressor country came under attack. The incident was reported by the Russian telegram channel ASH, which covers events in the Belgorod region. On the day of the attack, the channel reported the arrival of 4 HIMARS missiles at the military location in the Razumnoye 71 micro-district. Neither the authorities nor the official Russian media reported this, hiding the consequences of the strike, and the consequences are significant. On August the 3rd, Pepel reported heavy losses of the Russian armed forces in this attack. Around 15 servicemen were killed when a HIMARS struck a Russian military transshipment base near the village of Belotskoye in the Belgorod region, the Russian resource wrote. It is noted that the missiles hit the exact location of the accumulation of personnel and equipment. The source emphasizes that the base was used as a transit point through which the movement of troops and resources took place. Now the base has been relocated to another location.